To unpack this for us a bit more further, we're now joined by Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations and Director for Centre for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, Professor David Monyae, on the SA-China bilateral relations. And he joins us via our phone line. Professor, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Perhaps let's start off here. We saw the President of China landing last night, of course, in South Africa. And, you know, one would ask, what are your thoughts of his state visit, especially during the time where we are indeed seeing that Brics summit kick off today?
Oh, indeed. This was a significant visit. And if you look at the optics of it, the two presidents, President Ramaphosa and President Xi Jinping, seem to get along. And the relationship between South Africa and China, as we celebrate 25 years anniversary, has strengthened. I think trade figures speak for themselves. They are growing quite fast, and a lot of opportunity going forward. And the kind of assistance that China has availed speaks volume in terms of how China sees South Africa as a strategic partner, not just at the level of bilateral, but also in terms of achieving its own global agenda, especially on the African issues, on the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation.
Especially, you know, when you look at that anniversary that we are indeed celebrating, 25 years, you know, how important is this, you know, relationship between these two nations?
They're quite strong and strengthening on a yearly basis. The two countries share a number of common interests when it comes to global politics. They are both members of G20, and they relate quite closely when it comes to matters affecting global peace and security, given the fact that China is a permanent member of the Security Council. And the role that China is playing on the African continent as the largest trading partner and investing in core infrastructure, which is in line with South Africa as well as the AU Agenda 2063. So this really speaks volume that going forward, there are a lot of opportunities. However, the bigger question is to what extent South Africa is taking advantage of China opening up its markets in terms of South African products, improving its energy, as well as infrastructure, particularly rail, skill development, to ensure that South Africa competes well with a number of many other countries that are also looking at China. So therefore, there's a need to improve in terms of what we can do in China.
And of course, China is indeed South Africa's biggest global trade partner. Maybe if you can just expand and just tell us, what does this mean for South Africa and the state of our economy?
I think South Africa is driven by just simply dealing with job creation, inequality, and poverty. Those are key challenges that South Africa confronts, and therefore it wants to expand its trade with all trading partners, and China being one of the major. So while South Africa has good relationship with Western countries, the EU, United States, Japan, and others, it also wants to increase trade with China and other Asian countries. As you're aware that Asia is the most important region of the world with the largest population, and where really economy is taking place. So China will indeed assist South Africa to achieve its own strategic objectives. Like any other relationship, there will be challenges. However, I think visits such as this are ideal time and space to resolve those outstanding issues that might be standing on the way. In terms of balancing that trade, at the moment the trade is in favor of China. However, there is a commitment on part of President Xi Jinping to improve, to ensure that it will be indeed win-win situation.
And certainly, Professor, going into this visit, the biggest criticism coming out of this visit was indeed that trade deficit, and the criticism coming out there saying that it is indeed China that seems to be gaining more, and the two nations now agreeing, to narrow that trade deficit. How does that look like so that South Africa can also benefit, largely as well from this relationship?
I think key issues, firstly, it's South Africa improving its and beefing up industrialization. And I think it is important for South Africa to really press upon China to do more in terms of beneficiation. I think time has come for South Africa to stop exporting raw material in terms of the minerals that we have. And we have some of the greatest strategic minerals, such as lithium and others, platinum. There is a need for China to really work closely with South Africa to develop some of these mechanisms of ensuring that South Africa and indeed the entire African continent benefit from the whole comprehensive value chain and create more jobs at home instead of exporting jobs to other parts of the world.
And Professor, of course, we know that as much as the president of China is here for that state visit, at the same time, Brics is underway. What sort of role does China play in the Brics nations, especially now during a time where, these two countries are looking at strengthening their ties?
Indeed, China is the biggest power. If you look at 70% of the entire BRICS in terms of GDP, it's China alone. And there can never be a BRICS without China. However, I think China has its own agenda in terms of what it wants to achieve at the global level. South Africa also wants to take advantage of the bigger powers such as China, India, Russia, and Brazil, and others that want to join to ensure that they create a platform to push back on a number of key issues at the global level. The inequality between the global north and global south, particularly on issues of reforms of United Nations and its agencies, and also deal with issues such as climate change in a manner that does not disadvantage the global south, and technology transfer, issues of representation of the global south in these key global institutions of global governance.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time. That is Professor David Monyae from the University of Johannesburg in the Africa-China Center Studies.